we're going to go ahead and get started. So first, I just want our discussion leaders to introduce themselves. So first, I'll go first. My name is Julia Passantino. I'm the ZAPP Communications and Support Coordinator, and I work at ZAPP. And so I'll have you guys introduce yourself with your name, your organization, and when and where your event took place. Megan, if you want to go first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan McMahan. I am the operations manager for Howard Allen Events and American Craft Endeavors, artfestival.com. And we have produced 4 festivals since September, one in Alexandria, Virginia, one in Fort Lauderdale, one in Siesta Key, Florida, and one in Stewart, Florida.
Shannon, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Wojtas, and I'm the art director for the Arts Beats and Eats Festival. Our event took place over Labor Day weekend in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Okay, perfect. So I will ask everybody who is not a discussion leader just to mute themselves during the discussion. If you have questions, you're welcome to take yourself off mute, put them in the chat. We also have a section for Q&A at the very end. And I'll be recording this entire session. It's already recording. And we'll edit and share it out as soon as possible. If you signed up for the recording, you'll get it automatically. If you did not, just go ahead and email me and I'll add you to the list. And we may have some delays just because of COVID, but hopefully it should be out really quickly. So the first section of our discussion is going to talk about planning an in-person event. So we can just start in the order that you guys introduced yourselves. But for the first question, can you take us through your experience getting approval from your county or your city?
Okay, that's been a challenge. Unfortunately, that's been one of the most stressful areas because everything is constantly changing. We do, one bit of advice I can say is that we did stay in close contact with our main contact with who was issuing the permit every day. We would check in, see if any changes have come up, see if there's any other information they need from us. So that was a really important step that we had to follow up on. As far as how long it took, we tried to make a decision on an event at least 30 days prior. This gives us enough time to plan the logistics, marketing, and for our artists to make travel arrangements. So we did get in a few situations where we had to make that tough decision on whether or not to cancel or move forward. But most of the permits are ongoing. They need to be signed and approved by various departments. So some take a lot longer than others. But the experience has been stressful. It's been a lot, and we're in a lot of different counties and cities, so every process is different.
And Shannon, what was it like for you getting approval and going through those?
Yeah, it was very interesting, of course. So in Michigan, it's been a little interesting that there's not specific approval or a specific form. There's not like a COVID approved event. When we first started broaching the idea, our producer from the beginning said, we are going to do something over Labor Day weekend. He kind of rethought the event this year, and he wanted it more to just hold space than to be a super profitable event like we're used to. We're a pretty large event. We normally see about 400,000 people over the 4 days, and we just knew that we were never going to get anywhere close to that. So we kind of went a different route where our producer started reaching out to the governor's office. And when this was back in April to May, when things were just first heating up, and the governor's office kind of politely said, we don't have time to talk to you right now. So he went ahead and we formed a coalition that started out just with other event producers, and then it spiraled into, music venues, and then it turned into sporting events, and then it turned into hotels. And then eventually, as things started calming down a little bit in Michigan, the governor gave us a representative from the Tourism Bureau who reached out, and we had a couple of huge meetings with people from several different events just to start going, how do we have any sort of tourism activity? How do we have any sort of events? And then from there, we broke into different subcommittees. And so we broke into our festival subcommittee, and we just started talking with the local health department and asking them, what can we possibly accomplish? So we scaled super far back and started thinking our first proposal was just 50 people at the event. And then we, over time, we're slowly able to increase that a little bit. But like I said, we went in with kind of we went in saying, what can we possibly do? Not how do we keep our event? Because like I said, we're not even close. Can't even say it's a 10th of the normal event. It's like, what can we possibly pull off during this year to give our sponsors something, to give people a tiny chance to connect, and just, again, to hold space and to hold our brand for hopefully when this passes in a year, hopefully by next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed for sure.
Right.
Okay, and so what were some of the new regulations, safety and precautionary wise, that you guys faced with your local governments, and how did you go about accommodating them?
Obviously, the 6 feet apart. We had to space all of our booths out. We had to put a limit on the attendance into the festival. We had to place signs throughout the festival, just reminding everyone of what 6 feet apart looks like. So putting signs on the ground that they stand here. And then we had to, most of our festivals are just open air, come and go as you please. But we had to actually kind of gate the festival, where we had an entrance and exit, one walking directions. So those were all the main items that the cities and counties wanted to see in a controlled event. Whereas before COVID, it was open to the public, you can come and go. So they really wanted it to be under control and putting a lot of different safety measures into place.
For sure. And with your smaller event, what was your county asking for there? A lot of the same things, anything different?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And it was interesting. I really feel like we kind of went about it a different way. Michigan has been quite strict, I think. In the United States, I think our regulations have been a little bit stronger than some of the other states. And we actually found that we kind of had to write it for the government, to be honest. Like that, all that stuff was, like the 6 feet up, we spaced our booths 10 feet apart. At the time when we planned everything, we were limited to 50 people at a time. So we ended up having to cap it at 50 people. At first, we were only allowed 50 people an hour. Then it was 50 people at a time. So we were actually able to open it up to walk-ins, and we, more than doubled most of our hour-long sessions by doing that. But yeah, those were, sorry, that was my phone. But everything you just mentioned is the same thing here, Everyone had to wear masks as well, participants and visitors. And we didn't have any food or beverage. They were really iffy on having anyone consume anything, so we just didn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And once you decide you were going to move forward with your event, how did artists respond, and how many participated versus withdrew at that point?
Oh, the artists have been great. They've been very supportive. We really had only a few cancellations. They've been waiting to come out and sell, and they were very compliant with everything that we asked of them. So we really have had a lot of support from artists. They're eager to get out there. A lot of them have been struggling since March with zero income. So it was great having them and having their support. So we only had a few cancellations, really.
Mm-hmm. Were all those because of COVID, or they were concerned on their own, or were they for other reasons?
I think it was a variety. We did have a few felt that, they didn't feel safe doing it. They had underlying health issues that couldn't permit them to do the events, traveling, making arrangements, things of that nature. So it was a mix.
Okay.
And we went in wanting to limit it. We normally have between 100 and 120 artists, and we knew with the 50 people max at a time that we just would not have the foot traffic to support all those artists. So our goal was 20, and we lost a few people and then gained a few people and lost a few people, and we ended up with 18 at the end. But it was like our producer wanted us just to stick to Michigan artists, and I said, well, I really want to open it up to anybody. People are really looking, for places to show. And we actually were 50-50. We had people drive all the way from Florida just for the opportunity to be in front of people. And thankfully it was lucrative for them. It was worthwhile for them. But yeah, the same thing, the artists, I've had a lot of artists who've said, we're older, we've just decided to sit this year out, or I care for my mother who is older and I can't risk it. So we have had a lot sit it out, but nothing but positivity from the artists about us trying something. They were really excited to see somebody trying something, and those who came were just thrilled to have the chance to have a live show.
That's great. And so like kind of along with that, what changes did you guys make through for artist selection, the booth buying and participation process? Did you delay those significantly, change them completely from what you've done in the past? Can you kind of speak to that?
We juried as normal, giving them the heads up that, we are monitoring everything that's going on. We did offer refunds for any shows that we had to cancel due to COVID. So just giving them that kind of reassurance and confidence that we're monitoring everything, we're staying in close communication with them. We did have to cut the numbers at least in half for any event that we're doing. So as far as the selection and jurying process goes, they are a little more strict this year on who they're accepting, trying to even out local and national and all the different mediums so that it is a well-collected show. But those are pretty much the changes we have to do.
Yeah.
So we juried our show. We were trying to have the full event in the beginning. So we juried our show as normal. And then the artists were actually really great. So as the original idea for our event actually was we were going to do it was called art by appointment. And originally it was going to be that people could make an appointment with an individual artist and just come see that artist. Eventually it turned into making an appointment to see all 20 artists. But when we first came up with this idea, we opened it up to everybody who had juried in for that year. And we said, this is not, you won't be penalized for not accepting it. We're only going to take 20 people. We're trying to keep it small. We just want to know who's really interested. And then we opened it up so the invited artists and then our top ring of alternates, the very top, the people that we assumed would get bumped in, we opened it up to them. And then from there it was crazy. They sort of just it was amazing the array we had. We didn't have 20 painters. It was a really nice mix of all different mediums that ended up wanting to come.
That's awesome. Did you have to tell anybody no, I guess, since you only were able to have 20?
We didn't. We were gonna we told them we were gonna limit it to 20, and there was a big rush right away of 15 people who were diehard wanted to be in. And then those last 5 were the ones that fluctuated. We did go up to 25 at one point, and we were what, we'll figure it out. We'll make 20. We didn't want to say no to anybody. We knew everyone was struggling. So if we'd had 50, 60, we would have had to figure something out. We thought about maybe doing one day 20 artists and then a different 20 the next day if we had that kind of response. But since we didn't, we ended up just sticking. It was a 2-day event, so we just had the same artists both days.
I have a question. Did you all have any limitations or issues with the physical space that you were in? I mean, maybe not for you, Shannon, but Megan, I know you were dealing with a few different locations, and I'm just curious to know if the space itself allowed for you to socially distance and create one-way walkways as you were talking about, or if that was more challenging.
Most of our locations are on downtown streets, and we have to keep the fire lane a certain distance. So we didn't really have any challenges with the layout itself, having to rearrange everything. It's really just spacing everyone out at least 6 to 10 feet apart. But if we had events where it wasn't an easy walkthrough, they did end up getting canceled. We had a few events that were in a park, and there's just no way we could socially distance and have everyone spread out evenly. So those types of events, we did have to cancel or find a new location.
I have a question on that in response to what Megan just said. Do you have businesses on your downtown streets that had to be accommodated?
Yeah, so each property is different, but what we did is we actually roped off an area in between the booths and the sidewalk. So we had an entrance and exit point. Anyone coming into the show, if they said, I'm not coming for the show, I want to go to a merchant or I want to go to a restaurant, they would walk on the other side of the rope. And then anyone coming into the festival would get counted going into the festival and going the other way. So that would kind of give people the freedom and not limit merchants and not kind of cut them off from their regular customers that wanted to come in.
Awesome. Okay, so when you're looking at the regulations for artists, what did you require that they have, and what were you able to provide for them in that sense, like sanitization, masks, all of that?
So we ended up actually purchasing hand washing stations. We found out very quick when we got our first event approved and I went to go order hand washing stations, how in high demand they were. They have them in schools now. They have them outside restaurants. They're everywhere. And basically when you rent them, you can keep them as long as you want. People just keep having them serviced. So even if they were available to, you know, it wasn't guaranteed. So we went online and we bought our own hand washing stations. We set them up everywhere. We bought our own hand sanitizer. Our cleanup crew is using a special solution where they come in and they spray the site before, during, and after. It's called Safe Zone. We have extra masks for people who show up to the event, but for our artists, we are requiring them to have their own masks at all times. They also have their own hand sanitizer in the booth, any cleaning products, because there's different products that you can't use on types of artwork. So we've kind of prepared them in advance. You know, if you have resin, if you have mixed media, painting, oils, and if people want to come in and actually touch your work, you have to find some kind of cleaning solution that you can use that won't damage your work. So they were responsible for just keeping their booth clean, their artwork clean, and keeping in communication with anyone that comes in. We also had signs made up that each artist hung up in their booth because our artists don't want to have to be in charge of telling people what to do and making sure that all of the patrons are following the rules. So rather than make it uncomfortable for them, we have signs that say, you know, masks must be worn at all times. Please ask before touching, and no more than one person or group per booth at a time. And those were hung up in every single artist booth. So people walking around know the rules, and it's not up to the artist to have to, you know, stop and talk to them and kind of tell them what to do.
And what did it look like for you, Shannon?
Yeah, so we required the artists to have masks on at all times. We recommended N95s, but you know, whatever they feel comfortable wearing. And then we provided hand sanitizer at the entrance and at a few locations around. You know, we were in a parking lot, so it was just a basic circle you could do. So there was a few spots, and then we actually had like a passing lane. And in the passing lane, every artist had a sign that said the artist's name. And then it said below there, if you are interested in seeing this artist's work up close, please wait here to be called. So the idea was, again, one person, one group per, and there was this place for people to stand and wait so the artist could call people forward as they were ready for them. And there was also a notice on that sign, the reminder of masks must be worn at all times. And we did have extra masks at the gates, so just no one was allowed in without a mask. And we had staff patrolling. We didn't have any problems with anyone taking them off once they were in because we didn't have any food or beverage, so there wasn't really a reason to. But we had people milling just to make sure. Same thing, several artists said to me before that they were really uncomfortable with having to be the police in their booth. They said they know how the public can be, and they didn't want to have to be like, put your mask on, sanitize your hands, you know, so we tried to play that role for them.
Got it. And did the number of staff or volunteers you needed change with these events? Did they increase, decrease?
Oh yeah, it definitely increased. Like I said before, we're used to having just an open air art show where you can walk in and out, and now it's controlled. So I would say we needed to add at least 5 to 10 additional staff members because we had at least one at every entrance. And then we had our regular police and staff, but then we also had to have staff walking through, just making sure that everyone was moving, not congregating, just extra eyes because we're under a fine microscope when it comes to these events.
And ours went way down. I mean, we did such a tiny event compared to what we normally do. We had maybe a quarter of the staff that we normally did.
Okay, good to know. And how did you guys go about promoting your event to the public and to patrons?
We pretty much stuck with the same plan that we normally do, which is newspaper, TV, marketing, social media marketing on Facebook. But we did cut down on the advertising because, you know, we have to control the crowd. We don't want, before we wanted a huge crowd to come out, thousands of people, anyone. Now we have to keep it anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people. So it's finding that, you know, in the middle advertising area where you're attracting people, but you're not going to have a huge crowd come out. So it's been, you know, different, but it has worked. We haven't had a really large crowd, which, you know, like I said, we did want one, but now we can't have one. So we really have to limit our ad budget.
And we were very surgical in our media approach. So that this was part of the concept of our new show anyway, was that we wanted to work directly with the artists to try and get their patrons out there, because several of the artists who did end up coming from out of state, they normally do 3-4 shows in Michigan over a summer, and then they had 0. So the idea was, we can't have a lot of people, but let's have a really mighty purchasing crowd come out. So we worked with the artists directly to reach out to their databases. We originally were going to do a $30 ticket that was $25 was a pre-buy towards a purchase and $5 for entrance. After talking to the artists, we ended up deciding just to do the $5 entrance and waiving the $25. We didn't want to deter anyone from coming. But so we started just focusing on them reaching out to their mailing list, which I'm sure many of you have talked to a lot of artists. This has been a huge learning curve for them. We had a few artists, like there was one woman who was on her game as far as that, and they each had 10 tickets to give away. She gave away her 10 tickets within like 2 days. You know, they were all taken, clients of hers, and there's some artists that were like, I just don't have anybody to send this to. I've never kept a mailing list, you know. So from there, once we had reached out to the artist specific fans, we started reaching out to our high purchase, who we know on our purchase patron list, and marketing to them. And we gave free tickets away to all of these people because, you know, it wasn't really about the $5. It was about, like, you know, having someone make a purchase and say that they'll be there because they were so limited. And then after that, we were about half full. So we did 5 one-hour shows per day on the 2 days. And we could do 50 tickets to each, and we got about half sold at that point. And then our usual media contracts kicked in. And then the week or 2 leading up to the event, we had some television interviews, TV, radio, a lot of print. It was a much scaled down version of what we normally did. And then the rest of those tickets went really quickly. And then we also, this is kind of media. So like I said, Michigan's been extremely strict. So we originally had to limit it to the 50 people per hour. But then as we got closer to the event, things had started looking up a little bit, and there was it sounded like the health department was going to be a little flexible. So we were originally in a parking lot on our old festival site. But then the Royal Oak Farmers Market, which also does a lot of art shows and has the farmers market every weekend, they were still doing it. We decided to partner with them, and we moved the show into their parking lot. So that allowed all of these walk-up opportunities, and that went great. So like I said, so we did about half was specific people we reached out to, purchasers, half was just general public from TV advertising, print media, and then we had all of these wonderful walk-ups from people who were at the market that day. And then that was, like, you know, people who were clearly comfortable being out with their masks and a crowd purchasing, and it ended up being a really nice mix.
That's awesome. Did any of your guys' sponsorship opportunities change? Were you able to roll them over or use them for these events?
Yes. A lot of them, we had canceled events, so a lot of our sponsors were loyal and continue to do the events. It is harder, I find, to sell sponsorships because we don't know exactly what events are 100% confirmed until a certain date. So trying to sell that sponsorship can be challenging. And then again, it's most of these sponsors want to come out and meet X amount of people at an event. So since the crowd is limited, it's a lot harder to sell that.
Yeah, a lot of our sponsors, especially our large ones, have multi-year contracts. So most of them we rolled over to 2021, and they were all, you know, very supportive of that. But most of our top tier sponsors wanted the opportunity to do something. They were very much on board with our producer spirit of just wanting to show something, you know, do something to hold the space. So I'd say probably, maybe like 1/10 of our normal sponsorship budget was used this year. And we just, because we have an art fair, we're also music and a food show. So we kind of broke up the sponsorship opportunities along those lines, because we did something else for the music, and we did something else for the food show. And so just to give them the chance to have their name out there, some recognition.
So, thanks. So now we're going to transition to talking about the actual in-person event when you hosted it. I know you guys talked a lot about regulating crowds so much, but how did your attendance compare? I know we've like touched on it briefly, but like what were the specific kind of changes you had to make in regards to like you could only have X number of people? Like what was the big difference when it actually happened?
For our events, it depended on how big the footprint was, and it depended on what county or city we were producing the event in. So majority of, well, we've only had 4, but the majority of those so far have been a cap between 500 and 1,000 patrons at a time. So per hour, we could not have any more than 1,000 people. That included staff and the artists. So we have the entrance points set up. We have people with physical counters sitting there counting who's coming and who's going. They have walkie-talkies, and they're just communicating constantly how many they're at each entrance. We also created events on Eventbrite and encouraged all of our patrons coming to the show that they have to sign up for a time slot. So it's 1 hour, 2 hour time slots that they sign up for. And when they come into the festival, they're greeted by one of our staff members. They're able to show their confirmation from Eventbrite. And then we go over the rules where they have to follow the walking paths, the walking arrows for one-way traffic, to stay 6 feet apart, to wear your mask. So it was a big difference from, before COVID, but it's worked out great. We, one of our fears is having an overcrowded show right now. We can't have that because it only takes one media person to come out and take a picture of that, and then that will put us in jeopardy for losing events in that county or the county over. And we have been able to control that, and Eventbrite has been a really good tool for us to use to keep the crowd size down. And most patrons that come in, we do leave a cap on Eventbrite where if we have people just coming up to the show or didn't register, there's still enough room for them to come in. But that has really helped with people signing up beforehand and knowing what to expect and how many people are signed up for each hour.
Did you end up using any tools, Shannon? I think you mentioned you had 50 people per hour.
Yeah, so we sold 50 tickets per hour on Eventbrite, which we don't normally do either. We're just the same thing, like as many people as we can pack in, open air. We do a brief, like all weekend wristband pre-sale, but we don't really do pre-sales. People never have to sign up for a time slot. For this, you had to buy a ticket for your time slot.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned since you were holding the event in the space with the farmers market, how did you handle walk-ups at that moment with people?
So it ended up in the moment, it ended up working out just so smoothly. People sign up for a time slot, but it's not like there's a line waiting at 1 o'clock. All 50 people want to come in. It worked out great. We really, we got 250 a few times, but never really over. We had an entrance and exit person, again, taking their Eventbrite, and then they would just have a clicker, like you mentioned. And as people came up from the farmers market, we just say, hold on one moment, we just have to check our numbers. We'd make sure there was room, and then they could come right in. And then we had the plan at the end of each session. So as people came in, we said this session, if you came at 1, the session ends at 2, you'll be asked to leave at 2. And we actually never had to. There might be a few stragglers, but it was like 2 or 3 people, and then some people would start coming in for the next. But it was never something that we actively had to clamp down on.
Awesome. And how did you guys measure success going into your event, since obviously it was very different than a typical year?
Measuring our success, I would say probably everyone being compliant, patrons coming in and following the rules. That's a big thing that has to be done for us to be able to produce events moving forward. And then, our artists obviously being able to get out there, market themselves, sell work, and being happy and feeling safe. If we can successfully pull off a safe event where we didn't have any complaints from patrons, all of our artists felt safe, that to us is success right now.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. So like I said, we went in wanting to keep the spirit of the event alive. But we also knew that, you know, the court of public opinion is pretty intense right now. And we had several conversations that the safest and the easiest thing to do was cancel. And we knew that. And as strict as the government in Michigan has been, I feel like people are just as much. You know, we had a media segment for the music, and that we had a Zumba class where we drew out, you know, 6-foot squares and people could come and dance and do that. And we did a media segment where the dancers were a little bit closer just to fit in camera. And immediately on Facebook, we had people talking about how they weren't social distancing correctly. You know, they were outdoors, they had masks, they were just in tight for the shot, and people were paying attention. Very, very strong attention. So we wanted to enhance, you know, at least maintain or enhance our brand, certainly not damage it. We wanted to give the artists a chance to just show their work. You know, a lot of artists said to me that for them, it wasn't even about sales, that it was about just, they don't feel like their work is done until someone views it and they get feedback. And they would just felt like they were drowning for 6 months because no one had been able to see their art, touch their art, talk to them about it. And then financially, of course, you know, some of these people, like I said, traveled from quite a ways away. And the last thing I wanted to do in this environment was to take any more money away from people. I think I missed the question earlier. You said you were asking what we did as far as fees. Our normal fee is $4.90 for a space, and we dropped it down to $50. So we were just trying to, you know, keep it at the bare minimum for the artists. And so, I mean, thankfully, we do feel like we were successful. You know, we felt like we had no safety complaints from people who actually attended. Like I said, it was just that one social media spot that people were not a fan of. But everyone who was in attendance seemed to feel like it was very safe, no complaints. The artists, like I said, it was a small, but it was a really mighty crowd. The artists were surprised by their sales. Everyone left happy with their sales. Of course, there was a range, but some people did quite well over the weekend. So that was really exciting. And for us, we just wanted to let everyone know, you know, as we mentioned earlier, everyone's hoping this goes away soon. But just in case it doesn't, we're going to keep innovating. We're planning on being there Labor Day next year. It's going to look different than it looked last year. It's probably going to look different than it does normally still, but we're just going to keep trying.
Yeah, of course. Megan, I'm just curious, did you keep your booth fees the same as you typically would, or did you drop them?
Our booth fees were the same. We allowed artists we normally have very strict rules with late fees, and you have to have everything paid by a certain time. We didn't implement that. And we gave, you know, artists the option of paying deposits later. But our booth fees, we did keep the same. We didn't increase them, which is normally what we have to do every year when our city fees go up. But we kept all of our 2021 fees the same, and we will continue to offer some refunds if we have to cancel a show due to COVID.
Okay, so on a kind of positive and negative note, what aspects of your event were successful versus which aspects were the most challenging?
I think the most challenging is all the extra work for our staff members that we have to do. It's so much more than what we're used to, on top of trying to keep everyone happy and keep everyone in line. I will say setup for the artists is a lot easier because it's less artists. So it's an easy setup and breakdown. They're able to come in and out. But for our staff, it's, you know, roping off, splitting the street in half, roping it off, putting stickers down every 6 feet for patrons to stay 6 feet apart, and then putting down stickers for directional stickers to keep the flow of traffic moving so you know where to walk, handing out all the signage, you know, setting up the entrances, setting up all the signs. So it's a lot of work for staff, and now that we have a few shows under our belts, it's getting easier. But I think that was the biggest shock to us when the event, we were there at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's 10:30 and we're still scrambling to get things done. So it's a lot of extra work. I would say that was probably the most challenging. And then the negative social media comments that we would get leading up to the event, dealing with those, managing them. There's a lot of people that don't believe art shows should be going on right now. So it's really just having a successful, safe event for our artists, keeping them happy, keeping the towns happy. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's draining to get negative social media comments.
Oh yeah, our one event, for Los Olas Art Fair in Fort Lauderdale, we had a lot of negative comments, but those people aren't attending the event. They're, sitting behind the computer making negative comments. The people that are coming out to the event are the ones that are supportive of the arts. They know that if they're going to a grocery store and buying groceries, they can come out to an outdoor event and be safe and follow the rules. And that's the type of patrons that we're having attend. So it's been working because of that.
What about you, Shannon? What were some challenges and what were some great successes?
Yeah, same thing, the amount of work. I mean, we're working on a skeleton crew over here. We usually seasonally employ several assistants, a big staff, and I didn't expect the amount of work it was going to be to just create something entirely new. We're used to doing this huge event, so you'd think a 20-person event would be so much simpler, but you're reinventing the wheel over here. And it was really scary because we knew we weren't going into it to make money, but we didn't want to lose money. And the same thing for the artists. Like, we try to keep expectations really low for them, just telling them, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what kind of people are going to come, but we're going to try. So yeah, that was definitely the hardest part. It was just really scary leading up. Like I said, so much on social media. We were trying to put some positivity out there and try and do it as safely as we possibly could. But there's a lot of people out there that just don't want any events happening in any way, shape, or form right now. And we were so close to the school year starting. That was part of it too. People were upset that they were trying to get the schools back open, and how could we be throwing an event right now? So that was the court of public opinion was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, we actually heard really, really positive things about both of your organizations and the events from artists. So we try to keep a pulse on what's happening on artist forums and things like that. And people, I think, at least artists in general, seemed really happy and just grateful to have some event to attend. In fact, we had a comment, Megan, for the Alexandria event, that an artist had the best show in 3 years of any show. So I think, though the public sentiment may have been different, artists seemed very, very happy and just really grateful that events are taking place, because so many, obviously have had to cancel, that it was just nice to try to have some semblance of normalcy, I think.
And I think that's what we were trying to express. And I just want people to remember that too, that it's like physical health is important, but so is mental and emotional health. And I feel like that's kind of what we were trying to provide, as a little, just a chance to connect in some way for the artists and for the patrons. And it's, obviously Megan is working very hard to do it. We're working very hard to do it. Like, we want to keep everyone safe first and foremost, but your physical health and your mental and emotional health are both very important.
Yeah, and the artists are just happy to be there. When we did the Alexandria show, that was our first show we did, and it was exactly 6 months from our first event that we canceled. So it was 6 months from having a show, almost to the weekend. And every artist I saw, they were like, we're just happy to be here. I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'm just happy to be here. I drove, a few states away, and they'll travel. They'll make all the accommodations they need to. They're just happy to be out there, because a lot of them are struggling with zero income all summer long, and it's terrifying for them. So, our job as an organization is to keep art alive on the streets, keep these artists going, give them the motivation, but do it in a safe environment. And it is doable. And we honestly, going into Alexandria, it was very nerve-wracking. I had the worst anxiety of my life that week. It was scary. And after we did it, it was so successful. We're like, we can do this. Like, you can produce a safe event. And a lot of it is the way the event's structured. It's a lot of pre-planning. And it's a lot of work, but it's worth it, because you see the glow in these artists' face. They're happy to be back there, and it's giving them a purpose again,
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I had the same reaction. Every artist was just like glowing. They were just so thrilled to have a chance. They kept asking me like the week of, is it really happening? Is it really? I was like, no, it's really happening. Yeah,
I know. I know. I think that was in my mind up until that morning. I'm like, okay, this is happening. Like, we're doing it. Okay. And all weekend long, I'm getting calls. I'm like, no, it's happening. We're doing it, and it's working. So it was a huge sigh of relief.
Yay. So do you I know you kind of mentioned, did you have a good idea of like how artist sales went? And we heard from the one artist for sure that he had a great weekend at Alexandria, but do you guys know what your artist sales were like?
I think it was mixed. There were some artists that said this is the best show I've had at this location on this date in years. Others didn't do so well. A lot of people said that they felt like it was a mixed crowd. A lot of the demographics that we target are older, an older crowd, serious buyers. So there was a mix of that, and then there was a mix of people that just wanted to get out and support the arts, not necessarily purchase anything. I think overall everyone was happy, and a lot of artists don't measure the success of a show until months later. Somebody may have come up and got a business card and didn't decide if they want to buy it or not, and then they'll call them 2 months later and make a huge sale. So they really only record everything later on. I think they wait an entire year to measure their sales at an event. But it was mixed, you know, it wasn't, not everyone was selling, but they were just happy to be out there and give it a shot. So.
Mm-hmm. Everyone was really positive. I think all 18 of our artists left feeling like they had made enough money. I think what our saving grace was there was partnering with the farmers market, because the artists who knew their collectors and reached out to them we saw some very large pieces, several leaving. So that was obviously very successful for them. But then, you know, we had some smaller jewelry artists, and it was that impulse buy that we got from the farmers market that I think kept everyone afloat.
Got it. And what recommendations would you guys make to other events trying to host in-person events right now?
I think basically what I mentioned earlier is preparation is key. Having a very, very detailed plan, having a reopening plan that is pages and pages long, so that you have an answer for the health department or code enforcement or all these different departments that are going to be reviewing your permit and your plan. So really taking that extra time and preparing, setting aside extra time in the morning for setup. Personally, that's a big one I wish I knew. Whether you have a little more extra staff or getting there at midnight as opposed to 2 a.m. would probably help, because it's a lot of extra little things that you're scrambling to do last minute. And just staying in close communication with, you know, your team, your artists, making them feel comfortable going into the event, addressing any concerns that they have for safety, keeping in close communication with your city contacts that are issuing the permit. I think I have personal cell phone numbers from city managers and people, and I would just, you know, bother them and make sure that we're good, because we don't want a last minute cancellation on the event. So just always being updated and always being on top of everything, because I feel like things change every single day. Even I turn on the TV or I go on Facebook and there's something new, and that's how it is right now with planning these events. You have to just roll with the punches and keep going with any change or issue that comes up.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson we learned was, you know, don't wait for your government to come to you. You know, like I said, in Michigan, it's been incredibly strict, and you know, they didn't even have time for us when we first started, but we just went directly to them and said, why don't we write the playbook for you? We understand you don't have time to write the playbook, but we're struggling over here, so we need to start advancing things. So we were, and they were happy for the help. You know, the government's doing the best that they can, but they're struggling as well. So if you're willing to go in and kind of create it for them, lay it out for them, we found them to be very, very receptive to that. They were super happy with us that we came to them. Before we even announced the event, we had approval from the health department before we even thought about announcing that we were going to move forward with an event.
There's a question in the chat that asks, so now that you've held a small one weekend event, would you consider offering something like this or a smaller event over a couple of weekends, or maybe once a month or consecutive weekends? Would you consider doing it more frequently than just like the one time?
For sure. And we're already in discussions about next year. You know, everyone's hopeful again that things will be back to normal, but we know there might not be. And we this is our event that we own, but we do contract with a couple of other people to do their events. And we have a winter event coming up that usually is only one weekend, and we've actually broken it up over 6 weekends. So we're already doing something like that.
Cool. So I did get one question before the discussion as well, or a couple of questions from that person, but we've answered most of them. But did either of you have any entertainment or food or drink? Shannon, I know you mentioned you also split your event into the 3 separate parts for like the 3 different sections you have. So for those other events, I think, like did you handle like food?
Yeah, so we are the arts, the beats, and the eats, and that's very much, our site is like almost a mile long, and we have different, everything's intermixed, but we do have definitely like, here's the food area, here's the music, here's the art. And actually when we first started approaching how to do this year, our producer was just focused on the music. We did a drive-in concert series, which I'm sure, they've been happening kind of all over the place. And he was unsure that we could do anything with the art or the food. And I actually pushed forward on both of them. And what we did, so at the music, we had beverages available. It was a drive-in. And we also had the opportunity for people to pre-buy a meal that would be delivered directly to their vehicle. So that was obviously all contained within the vehicle that people came in. There was no food or beverage at the art fair. And then for the eats, we have a lot of food trucks that we work with. And we've been hearing that a lot of food trucks were having success going into neighborhoods. So we decided we wanted to treat Royal Oak to a little taste of Arts, Beats, and Eats. So we got in touch with neighborhood associations, and we scheduled a food truck to visit their neighborhood for the weekend. And then we would send one representative from Arts, Beats, and Eats there to meet them. We had a sign, saying social distancing was required and masks were required to order from the truck. And then just that one person stayed and kind of acted as security. And it was actually a great sponsorship opportunity. T-Mobile partnered with us, and T-Mobile went with us where we went, and they handed out free hand sanitizer. So it was a great opportunity. Yeah, it's a great opportunity for T-Mobile to get their trucks out in the neighborhoods. Obviously, everyone wants hand sanitizer right now. And it was exciting for the neighborhoods to have something to do, and it felt safe for everybody.
Did you have any food, drinks, other activities at your event, Megan, or just the art?
We did not. We couldn't even go there. One of the events didn't even allow outside food in because of people were taking down their masks and eating. So now we have not had any food or beverages, and we don't have alcohol at our events. So no, we couldn't even entertain it this year.
Oh, for sure. Okay, that's all the questions I have. I'm just going to open it up to like the general group now. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Any questions they want to ask? Any challenges you're coming up against as you plan your guys' events?
Hi, let me ask one question.
Okay.
It sounds like I'm with the Old Town Art Fair in Chicago, and we are largely a volunteer-run event, and I'm a volunteer, not a staff person. And we have 250 artists on neighborhood streets, and I'm not really sure how we can cut that down because they were all invited back, the ones that were supposed to be in last year's show, who, when we canceled 2020, I say last year, which was June 2020, we told them, gave them refunds and said they could be invited the next year. So I'm not really sure the best way to handle that if the city of Chicago, which is also very strict, says that we could do, but only if we had fewer artists. Anybody have any idea?
When is your event scheduled for?
Early June.
I mean, I would start with reaching out. What we did, knowing that we had so few spots, is we reached out and said, we just want to gauge interest first and foremost. And that kind of, there's a lot of artists that I think, unfortunately, are going to sit it out for a couple of years, and possibly they might just be done now.
Well, that's possible, but so far we've only had one, but we probably had over 100 who have said, because they are open to register now, so they are registering. Not all yet, but only one has specifically dropped out because of COVID.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you can extend your footprint?
Possible.
Because a lot of cities that we've worked with, that was one of our fears, is if we invite 200 people and they go from spacing booths from 6 feet to 10 feet, because at that time there was no exact guideline on how far apart actual booths had to be people. But if you have vendors set up, one show we were applying for, it was 20 feet. So a lot of the cities said, you know, if you can figure out how to extend your footprint, then they'll review it. So I would maybe go out to the site and see if there's anywhere you can extend it, just so that you have that extra room if you need to fill that in.
We've had people that have wanted us to extend it for years, but we haven't done it. So we do have some space we could probably spread out. So yeah, that's a good idea though. It's one to check out.
Great.
Because I don't know what requirement the city would have for us to be spread out. You know, they may say 2 feet, they may say you don't need to spread out because once people are inside a booth, they're separated from any other booth. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Christina, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was
Hi,
just.
Christina, first time I've ever seen you.
Hi.
Hi.
Is it possible at all? Is this even an option to extend weekends too, if you can expand the actual physical location? So you might have like half of the artists one weekend and half of the artists the second weekend?
Probably not, because there are a lot of shows in town, and also the Milwaukee Riverfront and Lakefront Festival is right after us.
Right.
57th Street is right before us. So, and there's a lot of overlap in artists. So I don't think we could extend it, but it's a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that especially how many shows have rolled over their 2020 artists. You know, there's plenty of artists who already have kind of a full lineup of shows, which will make their logistics pretty challenging.
Right.
We have a couple more questions. So one is asking Megan if you could share a little bit more about the logistics of tracking how many guests were in the fence at a given time.
We never reached capacity with allowing, it was anywhere from 500 to 1,000 patrons at a time. So we never reached capacity where we had a line out the door or where we had to really regulate people coming and going during their time slot. But we did discuss that if it does come to that in the winter months when the crowds start picking up, especially in South Florida, coming up with wristbands where it will have their hour time slot, 2-hour time slot on it, so that our staff that's working inside the event can, you know, have a visual and see who needs to go back out and check back in, or if we need to ask patrons to leave, which we really don't want to have to do that. That's, you know, having to ask a patron to leave a show is something we don't want to have to do. So we have been lucky the past 4 shows that we haven't reached our max capacity, but we do have a plan in place for if that's expected, because like I said, come January, February, and March in South Florida, we do expect to have a higher attendance, at least showing up. But advertising to patrons coming to the show, that you must RSVP, you must sign up for a time slot, and you must have it on your phone to enter the show. And they've all been, you know, more than willing to do that and follow the rules. So it has worked out. I feel like people that are coming to the events are really supportive of the arts and their town and wanting to get back and have some sort of normalcy in their lives. So they are willing to do whatever it takes. It's the people that, you know, leave the nasty Facebook comments behind their computers. They're not coming to the event. So we have been fortunate that it has worked out.
There is another question about so the challenges of walking directional paths, and if you have a festival layout that is not conducive to having walking directional paths without running like into an intersection, does anyone have any other suggestions about how you might manage walking traffic, you know, in it creatively, I suppose?
We use the stickers, the arrow stickers that go right on the ground, and we also use cones and roping to create aisles. But I would say if it's an awkward layout, I would go with just the stickers on the ground, because you have to show the county and show the health department and try to keep a flow of people going in one direction, not turning around and coming back. And it's also a good idea during setup if you tell the artist which way people are coming and going, so they know how to set up their artwork so that it is more appealing coming from one way as opposed to the other way.
I also find like situations like that, if you have volunteers available at pinch points where you know people get confused, because even sometimes with arrows on the floor, you know, the public, they're like, whoa, which way do I go? If you know an area that's going to be a problem, just having someone there to politely tell people how to keep.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I think that's all the questions we have, and it's almost exactly 1 now, which brings us exactly up to time, which is fun. So I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now. I will be sending out a recording to anybody who requested it. So hopefully you should see that in the next couple of weeks or so. And if you guys have any questions, suggestions about ZAPP Connections, this is our second session group. So we had 2 a couple months ago, and this is our 3rd one. We're happy to take any feedback that you have or any topics that you want to discuss. We're very open to making this the best platform it can be for you guys.